I don't know if you remember, but there's a mountain there. You just can't see it this morning with the fog. Good morning. It's a lot later than it's supposed to be. I didn't really remember that me turning an alarm on for yesterday did not mean it would also go off today. So I kind of just slept in as late as I wanted, apparently. So it's 9:30 right now, which if you're familiar, that's like 4 hours later than I normally wake up during the week. So my sleep schedule's screwed, but I probably needed the sleep, hopefully. But I didn't really film much last night, but I mostly just hung out, watched some stuff, did some drawing. I didn't really get back into doing anything like character work wise. I think it's weird because if I was revising or outlining or writing something that's very like, I don't know, but you kind of know what I mean, right? Something like that, it's really easy for me to do that for long extended periods of time. When it comes to all of these like idea-based things, I tend to have like little bits of inspiration just come to me and then I'll like flesh out a piece. And so it's a little bit harder for me to kind of sit down and be like, okay, we're gonna work on this for a long time because like I'm missing those little bits of inspiration. So that's kind of where I am after yesterday, is I kind of used up everything I had left. And so today it's kind of like, well, how are we gonna keep doing this, right, without those bits of inspiration? So I think I just need to sit back and think about what ideas I have right now still with different things, figure out exactly what left I have for the character world building that I really want to get done right now. And then think about, because I also have my magic system and more like regional world building mapping type stuff that I could do. So I just need to do some thinking on it. But first, I need to get some breakfast, get some coffee. I'm gonna need to shower this morning because my hair's gross. And I wanted to stand outside a little bit first because it is pretty cold, and doing that with wet hair will be not so fun. I do want to get outside today at some point. It's like very fine misting right now, and like you can see the fog's like all the way down almost to the tree line at the base of the mountains. Like you can't see the mountains at all right now, which I love that. But let me pull up the weather and see what I'm gonna do. Rain is supposed to end in like 15 minutes. And then it's not supposed to rain again until... Oh, it's just not going to rain again. And today it should get up to like 60 almost around 3 o'clock. So anything after noon should be over 50. So I should be able to take some breaks this afternoon to go get some movement in and walk or go through drills or something, which will be good. Yeah, and then tonight I'm going to our neighbor's house for dinner, so I won't have to worry about food there. But yeah, I'm gonna do some brainstorming, get some breakfast, take a shower, see if there's anything I, figure out what I want to do next, right? Okay, so I basically spent that whole time while I was eating my breakfast and showering and getting dressed, listening to a couple of videos on character. And Not that it's any new information, most of the videos were things that I've already watched, but that's something that tends to really help for me to give me new ideas of things to try. So I wrote down, let me grab it, some sticky notes of just like ideas. And so some of the things I can play with that I've thought of are each character's reputation. So if there's another character that would know of them, what is their reputation and how would that be like brought up kind of thing, as a way to show the character. And this will also be important for the main character for what she will think of them, either through their individual reputation or their like generalized reputation of like the groups or the jobs or the class level they're at, right? And then I also have like previous feats. So like what things have they done that will both impact their personality, give them a, contribute to their reputation, etc. Like not having a character start from nowhere. And this is a very important one for this story because I'm starting with a bunch of characters who are all sort of experts in their field, right? So they got there somehow. So I need to flesh that out a bit. And for some characters that's mainly already done, but for a couple it's like, I could like really make that a bit more like have earned, the skill level they're at, So that I have just making like a general list for each of their opinions on different things. So like things that they'll encounter in the story, things that like topics that will come up, things they'll have to make decisions on as a group, and what their opinions on those different things would be. So like one of the big ones is the use of magic, right? They all have a very different opinion on the use of magic. And like that's a really obvious one. I've already fleshed that one out a lot, but like having that written in one place, going through their opinions on the invaders, going through their opinions on society as a whole, on, basically what their mission is, all of that. I could go through how they express their stress, fears, hurt, etc., their joy, which I've already sort of have bits of that within the other things I've fleshed out, but it could be cool to put that in one spot to really think about that. I could flesh out more their turning points, which would be delving into their character arc stuff a bit more. So like what are like big momentous things that would cause turning points in their character arcs or even in the relationships. Flesh out their contradictions a bit more. I sort of started there and then sort of didn't focus on how to show these contradictions in a contradicting way, if that makes sense. So I could look at that. Weird little like personality quirks. So like, are they a morning person? Are they a germaphobe? Are they like super spontaneous? Little things like that would just make them a little bit more interesting. And I would tie that into like their background or something somehow. Going back to the four corner opposition it's sort of like cast development, but with using the competing ideas or theme to come up with like the main opposing forces in your story. So I could think about this a little bit, but basically each side of the competing ideals, so like this side, and then the top corners are like the pros of that and the bottoms are like the cons of that. And then having characters that represent each of them to pull the theme around. So I might think about that some more. And then in general, I think it could just be interesting to do a bunch of brainstorming on like potential scenes of ways to show personality traits in ways where it's tied into the plot. So like I just came up with one for my one character that's supposed to be like really lazy but actually a genius. Like he doesn't apply himself, but he's really smart. And I was trying to think of like what's a good way to show that. And I already know that my two characters that are kind of more like society people, right? They play this game that's sort of like a chess or Go equivalent, where it's like incredibly complicated, it takes a long time, it's very intense, and their only bonding thing in their relationship is that they both play this game together as a way to pass the time, and also because they like to bicker and argue, and it's sort of like the thing they do for that. So like they'll be sitting here in, the main room bickering as they play this game, and then this other character, right, who's the lazy genius, who really loves games, really loves everything silly and bets and never takes anything serious. If he sees this for a few days and he gets bored and frustrated, I could picture him going in and like challenging one of them to play this like super complex game he's never played before, but he's watched them a few times, right? and the, you know, he can challenge one of them, make a bet kind of thing, right? And then beat them. And that would be a really great way to show his personality. And also I could then tie that back into the plot by maybe while they were playing this game, the main character was trying to convince both of them or one of them to do something, right? But they're all fighting and they refuse to do it. So the lazy genius decides, oh, well, like, let's make it a bet for that. Because, like, they don't actually care about, you know, what the actual bet is. It's just the fact that it's a bet that they like. So they're like, oh, well, you know, if I beat you, you have to do this kind of thing. Which would tie in, like, some plot stakes while also still being silly and very character-focused. And I think that could be really interesting. So, like, stuff like that. Like, little things like that that could, you know, and then I can keep pushing them together, I think, you know. So, yeah, so that's what I'm going to work on this morning. I'm going to start by going through some of these notes I have written down and start thinking about that and how I could, you know, brainstorm them a little bit more. And then I think what I might do, you see these lovely paintings here on this wall? They're only kind of like sitting on little hooks. So like they're really easy to take down and put back up. So I think I might take them down and then use this wall to put sticky notes all over it with like ideas of the plot from like different parts. And then, yeah, just like keep brainstorming. And that's definitely getting into like the outlining side of it, but I think it's a good way to show the characters and like come up with ideas and like, it'll be helpful. It's working towards my story. I feel inspired to do it, so we're gonna do it. But first, some of this. Before we get started though, I thought I would check outside and yeah, it's like there was never a mountain back there in the first spot. Like you can't see it at all through all the fog and the clouds. It's definitely getting warmer though, and it's like no longer misting or anything, so, you know, as it warms up throughout the day, that heat will cut away that mist, and it'll probably be gone by midday, but for now, it's super cool looking. You can sort of see way over there a line of it on the trees. Okay, I'm very happy right now. I feel like I've made maybe a breakthrough, right, in figuring this out. And this is basically the same thing I said I was gonna sort of work on before, but let me pull this up. So basically I was thinking about this because one of the struggles I have with all this character building is I already have 3 pages of notes for each character plus their relationship pages with each character, which I have 5 characters, so like, oh, don't make me do math. Like the number of relationships is like, I don't know. There's a lot. There's a lot. Between all 5 characters, each individual relationship there is a lot. And so it's just very messy and hard to wrap my brain around like turning that into like plot and getting deeper on it. So I took some of the notes that I made this morning from the videos I watched and was thinking about the organizational side of it more and what might help me, especially because like I want to start, you know, brainstorming some scenes in these character relationships. And so what I thought of was I can have a page for each like part of the book per character, right? So I'm not going to count the like, I don't know, like the first act, right, where it's mainly just my main character and they have to get to like the inciting incident, right? That will probably be a separate page that I will have to do separately, right? Because and it's going to be a short act in this book. Like I'm not going to have a long drawn out one. It's going to be short because we need to get to the other characters. But so then I have the initial like meet cute, which for most of them will sort of include like their background leading up to their like acceptance of the call or whatever. But it's basically everything up to when they meet each other and like their initial interactions with each other to the turning point where they turn hostile towards each other, right? So I was like, okay, what pieces of character are important for these stages? So I came up, and I've already done a few of these, but here's one I just like put out all the sections and I haven't started it yet. But I have the outer self, which I was doing a bit of research on, like, you know, how to do characterization based off their different selves, right? Their outer selves, their social self, their personal self, or maybe outer self is their social self. Outer self, so like strangers and how they, like, how, like, with people they don't know, right? Or really formal situations, what is that outer self? What is their personal self? So, like, around acquaintances and friends. What is their inner self? So, like, who they think they are. And then their hidden self, right? Which they're not consciously aware of. It's subconscious. And I'm not doing that exactly, but that made me think of this, right? So I have that outer self, which is how all of the characters will initially perceive this character, right? This is how they will present. This is the version of themselves that they are putting forward at this point in the book. And then I have their known reputation of others. And this is sort of like what background information each character has about how they're going to perceive each other. So, like, do they actually know this character, and what is sort of their, like, opinion of them already? Or what do they think of this character's role, right? So, like, this is the botanist. What does the botanist know of, like, witches at the academy, or, you know, whatever, right? And then I have their motivation for joining, and this is just essentially why they agreed to take on this, like, heist task in the first place, right? Like, what is their reason for doing it? Because a lot of them, it's very different, right? They're not all just, like, trying to, like, they're sort of all trying to help the nation, right? And, you know, but it's more complicated and more deep than that. And a lot of them, when you first get to know them, you're going to be like, wait, like, they have very contradicting personality traits with this goal. So this botanist, for example, is very anti-magic. They think magic is essentially the path to destruction, and, you know, if we rely on magic, then we're doomed as a society, basically. And yet she's agreed to take on this task to try and unleash this magic that's been trapped and has caused, like, inner chaos. And, like, essentially she's working towards doing something that seems the very opposite of what she believes in, right? So that motivation for joining will be something that they'll sort of maybe not necessarily uncover in this stage, but it is relevant in this stage, right? If that makes sense. Like, behind the scenes for how I write what they do. And then I have their tics. So these are just other things that have been pushing them towards, you know, joining, right? And this is something that comes from Story Genius, which I really, really like. This idea of there's not going to be this one big bang thing that pushes them into accepting the call, accepting the story, right? Like, they have this history of pushing against whatever this is, right? Like, they're in their safe world and they don't want to leave their safe world to, you know, do something that kind of goes against the misbelief and, you know, avoidance of their fear, right? Like, they are being pushed out of their comfort zone, and their whole personality, this deep-rooted, like, wound or, like, trauma, right, that causes this, like, that is very, very strong. And in order to have it be clear in these characters that this is a very, very strong, deep part of their personality, like, they're not going to just be like, yeah, okay, fine, let's go do it at the second push, right? Like, it is going to take a lot of pressure, of building, compounding pressure to get them to leave their safe world, to face part of this fear, part of these things that they don't like, these misbeliefs, right? And go after this other goal, right? So instead of having just this big bang, okay, well, I guess I gotta go, it's having this building pressure to where eventually it snaps and the character is forced to take on this, you know, call or whatever, right? So even though I'm not writing from any of these other characters' POVs, I think it's really important for me to know that, because I can potentially add hints to it, right? Where it can sort of be clear, you know, that inner depth, right, of why they're doing this, why they're really doing this, why they were pushed out of their comfort zone. So I have that little section for those tics, and then I have background accomplishments. And this is sort of like the reputation of others, but, like, more of, like, maybe what they'd talk about of themselves. So, like, this group comes together and they have to do this great mission, right? And it's like, oh, well, why are you qualified to do this, right? So these are things that the sort of benefactor that brings them together might mention, things they might share about themselves, things they might be thinking about themselves, right? Which is very relevant for this part of the story. And then I have quirks, which these are just like, they're not even necessarily quirks, but they're little personality traits that are going to be present throughout the story, but this is maybe the first place they'd come up. So like, I don't know, one of the characters is going to be really like regimented. Like they think there's a very specific way to do things that is correct and they don't deviate from that. One of the characters believes that like in order to have a strong mind, you must have a strong body, right? So just these little tiny things that are not directly relating to the conflict, but will affect what they do and how they interact with each other and stuff. And then on the other side, did I already say this? The known reputation of others? Yes, I already talked about that. So yeah, so what they're coming in, believing about each other, their voice, and for now, I'm just putting like a single like line there of like, is this person more academic? Is this person more like high society? Is this person like very charismatic or very goofy? Like those types of high level traits. And then I need to, I don't know if I'll get to this weekend, but I did bring Dialogue by Robert McKee, because voice and dialogue style and talking style is something that is, I think, something I really want to work on. And I don't know if that's what I'm going to get to now, but I need to figure out what their consistent dialogue styles and voice will be. And then also that's going to change throughout the book, right? When they're trying to present their outer self, what is their voice going to be, right? Because the way they're going to talk and the things they're going to say is going to be a little different than when they start getting put under pressure, they start being hostile with each other, right? So there'll be like things that are similar, right? Like that character's voice, but then also their voice in that stage of how they're trying to present themselves to each other and what they think of each other, if that makes sense. So I'm leaving room for more of that. And then I have the turning point to hostile, which is essentially the like, what is going to show this character that they don't actually care about these people, right? Like what is going to push them from showing their outer self to showing the other side of themselves, right? And what I have for that, which I haven't started doing any of these yet, but instead of their personal self, I have their hostile self. And this is essentially where they're showing all of their like worst characteristics, right? Like this is, you know, the fun and games where they're all bickering and fighting and all of that. So it's sort of their personal self, but like I'm calling it their hostile self, right? Because all of these people for each other represent things they hate, things they look down on. And so their opinions on those things kind of shows that side of themselves of like, these are things that these people look down on. These are things they've been taught are wrong, are bad, etc., and how they're going to respond to it, right? So the only things I have for it right now that's going to be on here is, so their hostile self, and then triggers, so things that are going to trigger their misbelief, their hatred, their fear, their lie, whatever, right? Triggers for them, which, and this is, a lot of this is sort of from things I've already done, so I'm sort of referencing the pages I have and pulling them here into a more, like, in a way that makes more sense, if that makes sense. And then I have how they handle stress and being, you know, afraid or hurt, right? So when they're being pushed, how are they going to respond to that, right? Like, how do they respond to everyone else's hostility in this fighting, right? I might have an updated what are people's opinions on others if I think I need that. I'm not sure if I will yet, because I think it's kind of self-evident from that turn to hostile. Like, what is it about these people that made them hostile? So I think that's sort of already covered. But as I start doing a couple of these, I'll think about it. And then this is also where, like, again, it's fun and games. There's going to be a lot of, like, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while overall it's going to be them fighting and bickering and not getting along and not able to work together, I want there to start to be some glimpses of moments, right? Like, there's going to be moments where you're like, oh, wait, are they about to, like, you know, like, some of that underlying progress towards actually learning to understand and respect each other is going to start to show up here, right? So I have some contradictions, hints of their true or hidden self. How will they work with, hostile people with their goals. So, like, what is their actual goal in this phase of the book? And how is that going to, like, how are they going to go about it given the other characters being hostile with them, right? Like, they're not working together. So how is that going to show up in how they're going about their goals for this part of the book, right? And then I'll end this one with the turning point to fragile, which I don't know what all these turning points are going to be, but I think for the first, like, turning point to hostile, it's going to be just a big fight, right? Their first big fight as a group where they all storm away and then, like, hate each other, essentially. And then turning point to fragile, I don't know yet. Like, I don't know if this will be a group moment. I sort of feel like it should be a group moment because this is a found family thing about the group. So it might be a complete group moment. It might be a couple of, like domino effect scenes that create that, like, turning point to fragile. But that's essentially, like, the midpoint, right? I don't know if it'll actually be the midpoint or what, but it is, like, an act change, right? So I need to think about what would cause these people to get that first sign of each other's, like, respecting each other, understanding each other, starting to see the good sides, right? Because that's what they're seeing. Like, instead of just seeing people's bad sides, they're starting to see each other's true inner sides. Just, like, hints of it, of, like, okay, like, maybe I can ignore these things because this person is actually like this. But the thing I need to remember, and I should probably make a note of this, is that at this stage, they are all still holding on to their, like, misbelief. So I just need to remember that in how they're viewing each other. Because I need there to be a big difference here in how their fragileness is going to work compared to later on when they're actually, like, strong, right? So I have less written down for the later stages, right? Because I think I'll figure it out more as I go. But the fragile side, right? Once they've come to a fragile piece, I will have their inner self. So this is, the side of themselves that they're showing. It's not their hidden self, right? Because that's still repressed, but it's their inner self. It's some of these positive traits that are starting to show up that they kind of have repressed in the past a little bit. Yeah, like, they don't normally show people, right? So you're starting to see this private self in each other, and then fragile opinions of others. So I have to figure out, like, how they are going to view each other in a way that still holds on to their misbelief, is still very fragile, but also is starting to see these good sides. I don't know what else I need here. I'll figure that out. But then I also have the turning point to the darkest moment / the break, right, in this fragility, where the piece breaks. And then I don't know if this part will be multiple pages or if this will just be one. I have, clearly this one's just a sticky note, so I'm really unsure still, but I'll have the break. Oh, okay. Where they have to face their lie and, the why behind they believe this. Face their mistakes and what they've done, and then what leads to their aha moment. And I also need to figure out how to show this without them being a POV character. Right? So, like, maybe I can add a note for, like, how this presents, like, how this is visible. Right? So I need to know what this character will do, like, at their weakest. They have been absolutely pushed as hard as they can. Like, what is that coping mechanism? What is that, like, what do they do when they're pushed to that point, right? And it'll be different for each character. So I'll need to figure out what that is. And then what is it that's going to give them that aha moment, right? Like, and a lot of that might just be having things threaded in previous chapters that they can then pull on there, right? Like, if they have this big realization, that is an internal thing that my main character won't see of other characters. So I just need to think about ways to, like, add hints to that to where the reader can sort of connect the dots of, like, oh, like, this person comes out and says this, and they could have totally made that realization based off these few things that happen in the book, right? Like, I have to figure that out, right? Like, how it would be visible. And then the true self. So what is this true final self that they're gonna reveal at the very end, you know, they're not going to be perfect yet, but like, who is that true hidden self that they've, you know, not been able to allow to be free? What is their true goal, right? So let me write that down too. Like their true desire / unmet need. And then I can figure out like, you know, how are they going to connect with each other because of that? Like, what are these final relationship bonds going to be, which is basically strong versions of the fragile piece. And then once I have all of this, I can sort of reference these and kind of lay out like, okay, these are all the initial ones. And then I can start like playing with some ideas for scenes, and they won't be overly plot specific yet, but it'll be like, okay, like these two are going to have a fight where these things are going to come up, right? I'm not sure, but I'm really excited about this. I think this is going to work for me very, very well. I think this solves some of the issues I've been having with all this character development and having it still be in an organized way that will work for actual plotting, right? But it is, let's see, it is noon now, so I probably want to take a break and, yeah, take a break, get some food, drink some water, stretch, maybe go outside and get some movement in, and I'm feeling really good. I'm hoping I can get through a lot of this. Like, I feel completely reinvigorated and like, screw doing other stuff. Like, I don't need to work on my magic system if I'm doing this. Like, once I start putting sticky notes on that wall, like, I'm really excited. But yes, we need to get some movement in. We need to get some fresh air, like give my brain some time to percolate on these things a little bit, and then we'll get back to it.